coming up on Chasing the Natty. We give you the ultimate spring game rundown, rapid reaction style, right after this.
Look downfield, and Circus one-handed catch is made.
Jones goes to the end zone. Oh, what a catch! Devontae Smith, touchdown, Alabama.
Watch out for Mr. Robinson. This kid is going to be special and is already flashing.
This is Chasing the Natty, a college football fantasy podcast.
All right, welcome in everybody. Happy May, because last time we did this was April, so our apologies to everybody. We've kind of been on a semi-hiatus, finishing up our final semesters. We are both finally graduated, so huzzah all around. I don't have any sound effects or anything to play there, but yeah, we're both fully graduated from the University of Georgia now. I would have thrown up some pictures of us at graduation, but somebody didn't send me a graduation picture of themselves after graduation, after I asked them to. Speaking of that, idiot, moron, how do I phrase you? My co-host, Xavier Hood. Welcome in, Xavier. How you doing, man?
On that one, I never got that email.
It wasn't an email, it was a text.
It was a text. I never got that text.
Oh, but that's unfortunate. I guess we'll just blame Verizon or AT&T or whatever you have.
Yeah, never got that text.
Alrighty, well, never mind. I apologize for calling you a moron and idiot. I'll find another reason to call you that another time then. So,
yeah, I have
Xavier,
plenty of
how you doing?
photos. I'm good. Happy. Rested. It's been an exhausting weekend, but a good type of exhaustion. You know, finishing something for 4 years. It builds up, and then finally you're able to release all that joy and excitement. So it's been a good ride. Yeah,
it's definitely been a good ride. So now we're just all planning on what we're going to do for the future. And in the meantime, we have this to put our minds and efforts into. So we're very excited. We're hopefully going to we're definitely going to be a lot more, get you a lot more shows rather than once per month. We're going to hopefully get closer to probably 2 to 4 shows for you guys per month. So this is going to be a fun time. And so, the overview of today's show is going to be, first, we're going to touch on some transfer portal news on a few guys that we kind of find interesting we want to talk about. And then we're going to get into the bulk of the show, in which we are going to do some rapid reaction of all the different spring games that have happened over this past year. And so with that, we will go ahead and get into the transfer portal news. So the first guy we have up here is Mike Woods, wide receiver from Arkansas, transferring to Oklahoma. So Xavier, do you want to go ahead and take this guy and give me your thoughts on this?
Yeah, Mike Woods to Oklahoma, big shock to everybody in college football and the college football fantasy community. Primed up to be the number 2 wide receiver for Arkansas behind Treylon Burks, and now it looks like he's going on to Oklahoma, where honestly he could push Marvin Mims for that number 1 spot. More experience, if him and Spencer Rattler connect on a more productive level, then it could spell trouble for Marvin Mims, but also Mike Woods looks like his stock is going up.
I hated this. I'll be honest. I hated this so much because when he first transferred, the rumors were South Carolina, and I'm like, oh my God, South Carolina. Luke Doty's not the best, but he would be instant wide receiver 1 there. I'd love to draft him there as a mid to late round flyer. I thought it would have been fantastic. There were rumors. So I'm trying to think of some of the other rumors that were going on back then. But regardless of wherever else he went, he chose Oklahoma and has put himself into, in my opinion, what's already a pretty loaded wide receiver room with Marvin Mims, with Theo Weiss. Got a little less credit with Charleston. Mario Williams. Again, you got a lot of great wide receivers going in there, and I don't know. I just wish he would have gone to a team where he could have stood out just a little bit more, because this guy is incredibly talented. Let me give you the stats from last year: 32 receptions, 619 yards. That's good for 19.3 yards per catch. That's insane. This man is the ultimate deep threat in the SEC. He had on top of that, he just had 5 touchdowns as well. And he looked like he was about to break out even more. Like during his spring game, we'll touch on this when we get down to this as well. He and Burks looked like the guys. Like they took him out pretty early in the game because Arkansas was like, all right, we know what we have in these guys. And so again, that was what kind of made it the shocker when he transferred probably less than a week later, if I remember correctly. So yeah, like I'm happy for Mike. Like obviously if he thinks this is the best decision for himself, like obviously all the power to him. But as a guy who was actually looking to draft him as the number 2 wide receiver at Arkansas, like actually be willing to draft him in leagues, I don't know, this kind of hurt my stock for him just a little bit in terms of his impact for this upcoming year. Unless I start hearing news out of camp and everything that he might be the 1 or 2 guy at Oklahoma, which obviously then I'll put him back up. So
yeah, I have high hopes. I think with the Lincoln Riley offense and with Spencer Rattler, what we saw towards the end of the season when he finally polished his game and looks like he's ready for his breakout year. I'm excited for Mike Woods. Definitely a talented room now, more talented room now. Oklahoma's up there with Ohio State and Alabama, probably like a tier below, but it will be a fight for some targets. But I think Mike Woods, considering the competition that he went against in the SEC, I think he'll thrive in the Big 12 with their lack of defense. I mean, although they are getting better, as this past year has shown, not all of them are still, up to speed. Mm-hmm. So I think Mike Woods can break out and still be a very good option for somebody at maybe not at a wide receiver 2, but if he falls and slips, I do advise to.
To be clear, I wasn't meaning like wide receiver 2 on my fantasy team. I'm talking about him as the wide receiver 2 at Arkansas. I was willing to draft him as like one of my backups and stuff like that. Yeah, I'll be clear on that. Yeah, no. He was not in my top 24 wide receivers. It takes a very special system to do that, like Ohio State or really Oklahoma. But even still, Oklahoma, we don't know who that number 2 guy is yet. So with all that said, we'll go ahead and move on to the second guy. And this was the one I know that, Xavier, you were kind of scratching your head a little bit more about, and that's Jameson Williams transferring from Ohio State to Alabama. So you went first last time, so I'll give my thoughts here. I don't think it came to anybody's surprise that we saw wide receivers transferring out of Ohio State because that room is just loaded. And it did not help. Well, again, I'll phrase carefully here. It did not help that Chris Olave came back for his last year. I think if Chris Olave had left, you would have seen some of these guys that are rumored to be transferring out of Ohio State probably a little bit happier with their situations, looking like they might get some more targets and playing opportunities. However, because he's back and because he is a known commodity out of Ohio State, he's going to get pretty much all the reps I believe he got last year. And so I think guys like Jameson Williams kind of read the writing on the wall and said, all right, listen, if I'm not going to beat Garrett Wilson, I'm not going to beat out Chris Olave, I'm not going to beat out Jackson Smith and Jigba. And then you got 2 more guys coming in, these freshmen, Emeka Egbuka and Marvin.
Marvin Harrison Jr.
Thank you. I was like, I almost said Marvin Williams for some reason. My brain froze there for a second. Yeah, Marvin Harrison Jr. 2 of these guys are all reports out of camp say that these 2 are phenomenal. They are the next wide receiver duo out of Ohio State. So I'm not surprised by this. However, what I think got a lot of people scratching their head about was him transferring from Ohio State to Alabama. Because a lot of people were like, well, if you thought you couldn't start at Ohio State, why do you think you could start at Alabama? Because again, it's not like he was like a starter last year. Again, he had 9 receptions, 154 yards, and 2 touchdowns last year. And that's not bad or anything like that for a guy who was kind of sitting on the depth chart. But again, I think a lot of people are just kind of surprised that I guess some people are surprised that he thought that even though he can start at Ohio State, he can start at Alabama. I have my thoughts on this, but I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Xavier. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, after some time thinking about this, I'm still confused about Alabama out of all the other choices and offers that he got. But as I look back to Alabama, they lost Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle. Everybody's expecting next up would be obviously Mechie had a great season. He's going to come back. But then after that, it's it's kind of questions and unknowns. I won't, slate Bolden where he's a fantastic player, and I expect him to get the start as well too at Alabama. But then you have a Jai Hall that showed up in the spring game. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But and Javon Baker who's coming back, and so you have a lot of guys that have a lot of talent, but we haven't seen them, get the reps or play enough games or the experience. And Jameson Williams, even though concerning he only had like 9 receptions for 100 yards, he still was able to play, I'd say, kind of more than these other guys then, because you had a Heisman, a guy coming off an injury, Mechie, who kind of showed up middle of the season after Waddle got injured, and it was like, oh my God, this guy's the next Alabama great wide receiver. That's what everyone's expecting. But I think Jameson Williams, if he feels confident enough in himself to, beat out some of these, other guys and feel like his talent is maybe a little bit better to win, then I don't fault him. But if it kind of backfires, then that's on him. I would have liked to see him go to a, maybe easier room to compete for, where he probably would have gotten the most targets. I don't know what school I would think of, maybe like a Florida or
I'm trying to think of some of the other names that were rumored for him. I should have wrote this kind of stuff down, but
yeah.
Again, regardless, I agree with you on the most part. However, one thing I saw people were kind of discussing was the fact that Jameson Williams provides something for Bama that they're kind of missing with their wide receiver room this year, at least proven guys, and that's a speedy guy. You had Jalen Waddle go off to the draft last year. You had Henry Ruggs the year before that, and you do have some new kind of fresher guys coming in this season, like JoJo Earl, got Leary coming in as well, and but again, they're freshmen. They're not proven guys yet, and I think the only reason why Saban even let Jameson Williams come onto the roster, and you got to remember this is a two-way street. Like they have to offer Jameson Williams the scholarship at the end of the day. So I think the only reason why Bama offered him the scholarship was that the fact that they are missing a guy like that, and I think he can provide like a different tempo for that offense to run in outside of Mechie, outside of whoever the running back ends up being. I think. Be it Robinson, McClellan, or even Roydell Williams, who's now kind of popping up a little bit. So, again, I'm excited to see what he does this year. I'm probably not drafting him, though, until I start seeing some actual production, either in fall or in the actual games later on in the season. I won't be drafting him preseason, definitely. And so the last guy we got here that we will talk about is N'Kosi Perry, who's been in and out of the transfer portal a little bit this past year. I think there was a little bit of stuff going on with him trying to finish up school, and then like after he finished up school, then he entered the transfer portal again. Regardless of all that, he is transferring from Miami and he's moving on to Florida Atlantic. So Xavier, I know you kind of adopted N'Kosi Perry as you adopted Miami last year as kind of your ACC team that you're kind of rooting for. So what's your thoughts here about N'Kosi Perry?
Yeah, he wasn't a bad quarterback in no regards. I think Derek King was obviously number one. Nobody's going to replace him even after injury. And then with Jake Garcia coming in and Manny Diaz having so much faith in him, I see. I understood why N'Kosi Perry was going to leave because, as we saw in this, we'll get to that later. But Jake Garcia had a day for the spring game and show a lot of promise for that program. But N'Kosi Perry, in no regards, is a bad quarterback. And I think this is a good move, especially for a Florida Atlantic team that was honestly, normally they are underwhelming, to say the right. So now they have, maybe N'Kosi Perry will be that energizer quarterback to, maybe put up the stats. They probably won't win that many games, but let's see. I'm trying to think of the word. I'm more excited about the production that he could provide with the Atlantic team. Trying to remember, they had a running back last year that was pretty good, and I think they have maybe one wide receiver I was interested in last season. I don't know if they've moved on or if they're still there, but I think N'Kosi Perry has some weapons there for him to use, especially in that conference.
Yeah, so I'm glad you kind of just immediately went for the fact that N'Kosi Perry really isn't that bad of a quarterback. I think a lot of people are kind of still stuck in the 2018, 2019 seasons where he was kind of battling back and forth between, first of all, injury, but also just Miami could not decide for the life of them whether or not they're going to run with him or Jaron Williams for a couple of years there. And so, if you look at his stats from those seasons, they're kind of middling. 1,091 yards, 13 touchdowns, 6 interceptions in 2018. 2019, he had 1,041 for 8 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Like, these are not numbers that inspire anybody. However, the game I do want to point out was this past year in the bowl game against Oklahoma State. De'Ara King goes down, I believe, like, what was it, like halfway through the first quarter or at the end of the first quarter? It was pretty early on in the game. They throw N'Kosi Perry out there. And again, like, not like a huge game by any means, but 19 for 34, 228 yards. That's the most he's ever done outside of one game he did in 2019 against Virginia Tech. He threw for 2 touchdowns, didn't turn the ball over. I think he's a very solid starter for a smaller school like Florida Atlantic. I think he'll do good things for them this upcoming year. He does have to kind of compete with the incumbent starter there, Tronte, but I'm actually looking up the receiving from last year, and it doesn't look like there's anybody that really stands out in terms of like number one guys. But I feel like N'Kosi Perry is the kind of guy where if you put if he can find some talented guys to rely on, he can absolutely thrive this next upcoming season. Now, in terms of drafting him for fantasy and everything, I'm not quite there yet with him. Again, I need to hear good things out of camp. First of all, I got to make sure he's a starter, but also, yeah, I'm gonna probably hold off drafting him for now. But he would definitely be a name I would want to consider coming in for the waiver wire going into the season. Is that where you're at, kind of, Xavier, or
Yeah,
you got a different opinion?
The same thoughts.
Perfect then. All right, so I'll name some other honorable mentions, some other interesting transfers that have happened recently. Xavier, if any of these guys kind of pique your interest, we'll discuss them a little bit more. But so Stephen Carr, just today, transferred from USC to Indiana. They're starting running back from last year. Keontae Ingram comes in. Sounds like Stephen Carr is now out. Shadrack Banks, wide receiver from Texas A&M, is transferring to TCU. TJ Finley, who started for a couple games last year for LSU, is transferring away from LSU. No real rumors about where he could possibly land. Joe Milton, starting quarterback last year for Michigan in their first game, is now transferring to Tennessee. Ches Melusi, a running back on Clemson's a higher running back on Clemson's depth chart, is transferring away from Clemson, and the rumor is he's looking at Wisconsin. And then the last one here is Jordan Johnson, a wide receiver from Notre Dame, is transferring to UCF. Do any of those names kind of pique your interest, Xavier? If not, we can definitely just move on to the spring games.
I know the Stephen Carr transfer is a little bit piques my interest a little bit, considering I've seen a lot of people rave about him when he came out of high school. They were like, he's a very talented guy. I don't think he was rated that highly, but
no, he's a 5-star.
He was a 5-star, really. Ooh.
He was a 5-star.
Whoa! So a lot of people are excited about him going to Indiana with that with their program being on the up and up, being a real legitimate contender in the Big Ten. You know, with Ty Freifogel and Michael Penix Jr. If he can win that starting job, then that offense looks a lot more interesting. And, you know, Stephen Carr looks a little bit more interesting on draft boards, possibly on my draft board. Now I have to hear some things on the camp, but
I was there's some other names there at Indiana. For some reason I can't think of them off the top of my head, but there's some other running backs there. I believe it's very possible they could go running back by committee this upcoming year, in which if that's the case, that's very unfortunate. But I do think Stephen Carr does have the talent pedigree in order to possibly be a name that you look out for in the portal or in your drafts there. So with that being said, unless you got any other names, by the way. All right, cool. With that being said, let's move on to the beef of today's show. And that is the rapid reaction to all the different spring games going on this year. And so, how this is going to work, you can see if you're watching on YouTube, there's a timer up there in the top right corner. Each of us is going to pick a spring game. We are going to take 3 minutes to describe what we think is the most important aspects of those games. If we finish before the 3-minute timer is up, we can absolutely ask the other hosts to kind of give their thoughts on it. And so, yeah, it'll kind of go kind of draft style. We'll go back and forth. So I'll start first, and I think it's only fair to begin. All of this with the reigning national champions, and that is the Alabama Crimson Tide. So I'm going to go ahead and give my thoughts on their spring game. So some things that kind of stood out for me for the Alabama spring game. First of all, just on a side note, mic'd up Nick Saban was awesome. like actually getting to hear him coach on the field was worth every bit of watching that entire game. Some other things that stood out to me: Bryce Young, clear number one quarterback. I saw some people being like, "Oh, Paul Tyson, you never know." No. Bryce Young is the number one guy there. Some of the guys that kind of stood out with all that, like obviously, I think almost everybody's seen the Ajay Hall highlight reel that he put on during that game. He went for 4 receptions for 72 yards. He didn't get a touchdown. There's actually very, very few touchdowns in this game that happened on there. In terms of the wide receiver core, again, Mechie was out, so you had some of these younger guys kind of get their chance. That's where we got the Ajay Hall highlight reels and everything. And I don't think he will be a full-time starter this upcoming year, but I do think he'll probably be one of those guys that's too talented to keep off the field. Some of the guys that do expect to kind of start, again, Mechie, as you mentioned earlier, Slade Bolden will be up there. Another thing that kind of popped up to me that I hadn't really heard about before the spring game, I'll be honest, Trayshawn Holden. Dude went 9 receptions for 89 yards in this game and definitely almost got himself another touchdown if it weren't for just a drop ball at the very end. So I think he could absolutely be a value this upcoming season. And the other thing was the running back room. I wish we could have seen Brian Robinson Jr. out there. He was unfortunately out for the game. And Chase McCollum looked like the most talented back out there. But I want to see him compared to Brian Robinson, who's going into the senior year. I want to see how those two compare, because those two are the ones that everybody's kind of debating. So those are my kind of thoughts on this. Xavier, you have any additional thoughts in this last minute here?
Yeah, I will say I disagree with you on Jai Hall. I think,
all right,
even though I think he will be a full-time starter this upcoming fall. I think, like you said, he's too talented to be off the field. And from what I've seen,
you want some water for that fire you're throwing there?
A wide receiver, it's not unheard of at Alabama. So
you're right, Jalen Waddle.
Yeah, and I think he has the talent to show for that. From what I remember when I was watching the spring game, they said he came early to school. And as soon as he got to campus, he can work on his craft and was by far probably one of the most talented receivers that they had. So I think Nick Saban notices that. They have a whole entire spring and summer to work on his craft, and I think he will be primed to be, moving his way up the depth chart of that wide receiver room. But I think he will get the start come fall. But that's everything else you hit on the nail. So
I'll disagree with you slightly again on Ajay Hall, because you have to remember he was on the second team. This wasn't Bryce Young throwing to him. This was Paul Tyson. This was Barker throwing to him. So clearly he hasn't moved quite his way up on that depth chart quite yet. Now, again, clearly he has the talent. All right, I'm out of time for this round. So, Xavier, which team are you going to discuss?
We're going to go our alma mater. We're going to go with Georgia.
Oh, it feels good to say that.
All right, man. So,
reset timer. Go.
Well, first off, JT Daniels is going to be a great quarterback again. With a full season with Georgia, he's gotten more comfortable with the offense. He's calling his own plays, making his own changes at the line of scrimmage. He's getting more comfortable and getting used to a Todd Monken style of offense. Now, with the Todd Monken style of offense, it's more of like a more spread offense, different things. So wide receivers are becoming more relevant. We're still using our running backs really well, but getting to our passing game. Tight ends, Georgia with Darnell Washington is going to be a monster for Georgia, to say the least. 6'7", 2. They say he's 280. He's listed at 265. Nobody really knows. He's just one big old bear, and he will run you over, block you, score a touchdown, do anything. But an interesting thing about another tight end that we have, and it's not Ryan Fitzpatrick, it's Brock Bowers, freshman coming in this year. Looks really polished already. It looks like damn near looks like a receiver out there, how fast he's running these routes. So I'm really excited to see that, and that might be an option for either, the future, a Campus to Canton or a dynasty type league, or even this upcoming season. We really don't know. This offense just looks so new, but obviously these guys are working on this the entire summer. The running back room, obviously, it's just one of the deepest, if not the deepest in the nation. You have James Cook coming back, Zamir White, Kenny McIntosh. A lot of people are excited about Kendall Milton, Dejon Edwards. So you're just stacking it up with 5 great backs. But I will say Kendall Milton, a lot of people are high on him and expect him to lead Georgia with rushing yards at the end of the year. Zamir White is always going to be a reliable back. James Cook might be a little dual type running back with receiving and rushing. So that's one to look out there if you're in a PPR type league, because he will get those receptions. Yeah, I'm trying. Oh, let me move on to the wide receivers. Well, as we all know, George Pickens tore his ACL, and I'm hearing good news that he might be able to come back by week 4. I don't know about all that, but it's something to have some hope towards. But we still have. Oh man, why am I blanking on the receivers that we have?
Well, you got Adonai Mitchell, who broke out in the game.
But I was like, we have another guy. Jermaine Burton.
There you go.
He sprained his he hyperextended his knee, so he wasn't able to play. So we put a lot of young guys out there, and they produced. One standout freshman that I'm excited to see this season, Adonai Mitchell. So it looks like he could replace that. He has that George Pickens body where he has the length for it and is able to go up there and get it. So I'm excited to see what him and JT's connection. And also, I need people to stop sleeping on Kearis Jackson. I know he's not the flashiest guy in the world, but dude gets receptions and rarely, and I mean rarely, drops the ball. So he will be able to get touchdowns and receptions and yards at the end of the day.
All right, you took up all your time, but that's fine. I'm going to mention 2 tiny things that I think should be mentioned here. First of all, Darnell Washington is, to me, going to be a reliable tight end for you in your fantasy football leagues this upcoming year, like this year. So redraft leagues, Campus Canton, whoever you have, get Darnell Washington. I think he's going severely underdrafted in most leagues. Brock Bowers, like you mentioned earlier, Xavier, you can get him for cheaper if you're in a dynasty or if a C2C league. The other thing is, the surprise for me was that I was expecting a battle between Carson Beck and Brock Vandagriff, and while I still think they're both very talented, to me, I was surprised that Carson Beck really seems like the QB2 for Georgia right now, at least exiting spring. That could change over the fall, over the summer and everything, but it looks like to me the next guy up on that depth chart will be Carson Beck, which I'm happy to hear about and everything because the dude's worked hard. So he also kind of proved to me that it's not just JT Daniels that's improving the passing game, it's just the entire system, because he threw for 236 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he was splitting time with Brock Vandagriff. So we'll move on from Georgia here. I'm going to go ahead and go to the school in Ohio. Oops, forgot to take off the Georgia logo. There we go. I'm going to Ohio State. So let me get my notes out here for Ohio State. So the big thing I was looking for here is, of course, what everybody else is looking for. That's that QB battle between CJ Stroud, Jack Miller, and Kyle McCord. So I will kind of read off their stats here real quick. CJ Stroud, why did I say JT? CJ Stroud went 16 for 22, 195 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. Jack Miller went 17 for 30, 228 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Kyle McCord went 12 for 17, 184 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. So things I kind of put out there. To me, CJ Stroud looks like the leader in the clubhouse. You got, I think probably your next guy up is Kyle McCord. I'll be honest. I like what I saw out of him. I think he earned that 5-star pedigree. I feel like he's kind of one of the forgotten 5-star QBs from last year, because nobody expected him really to start this year, because you had Ty Thompson, who could beat out Anthony Brown. You had Sam Heward, who could beat out Dylan Morris. You had all these other guys, or Caleb Williams, who was the number 1 guy, Brock Vandagriff, who could come to Georgia. And I think Kyle McCord kind of got lost in the shuffle from all those highly ranked quarterbacks. But he has a legit shot to win this job. I do think it is a legit competition there. Again, if I had to put money on it, and I do, or with who I draft, I would draft CJ Stroud right now. But I'd say probably the only one there, again, they say it's a 3-way battle. I don't see how that's possible with Jack Miller right now. Not saying that he should transfer or anything like that, but right now I think he has a long way to go compared to the other 2 to earn that starting job. Other thing here, again, I wish Master Teague was out there. I want to see him play. Travion Henderson, the freshman, 5-star freshman running back they just got this year, looks great. And then they are loaded at receiver. It is ridiculous. We discussed this earlier with Jamison Williams. It's crazy how much they got. I just realized I never started the timer for this, so I'm going to assume I'm out of time and just move this over to Xavier. Xavier, what you got?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. The wide receiver room is loaded. I think CJ Stroud Stroud has the starting job coming up this season, but the backup, his name always eludes me. Like you just said it a few minutes ago.
Jack Miller?
Jack Miller definitely seems like that number 2 role, that number 2 quarterback. And Ohio State's doing a great job of recruiting quarterbacks. They have so many other guys coming in next year. And
I was like, that Quinn Ewers coming in next year.
Yeah, it looks like they're getting prep for something. But overall, yeah, I'm excited about Xavier Henderson. I really did want to see Matt Teague play to see what that would look like, to see if Matt Teague has that job unlocked. But it's fine for now. We'll just wait and see and hear more news out of camp.
Sounds good. All right, your turn. Which team you going with now?
We're going with the U, Miami.
All right, let's go Miami. And I'm going to reset the timer this time. Go ahead.
Okay, with Miami, they started off the game with second-year quarterback Van Dyke, and he didn't disappoint. He was very, I wouldn't say he was above average. He wasn't a terrible quarterback, but the real news is Jake Garcia, freshman. The kid's supposed to still be in high school. He's coming in a year early to be in the program, and I believe he threw for 225 yards.
255.
252 yards. 19 of 25 passing. So he's very efficient, got the ball down the field. I'm excited to see more out of him. I know USC is probably, feeling a little bit upset because they had him in their hands and he just left, or decommitted. And Manny Diaz saw the talent in him and snatched him up. But I really want to get on to one other guy where he disappointed me last season, but I'm starting to get intrigued a little bit more again this year, and that's Charles Rambo, transfer from Oklahoma. So I think that's going to be a really I haven't seen him. I haven't seen him that much in a lot of drafts so far, and I think he's a very sleeper pick for a lot of people. I know Mike Harley. A lot of people view Mike Harley still as the number 1 role, and I do as well. But I wouldn't count on Charles Rambo if it were a situation that if Charles Rambo is the number 1 receiver there, and they have a few other receivers that are being brought along and brought up, so that Miami is looking a lot like the old Miami of the early 2000s. Jalen Knighton had their only touchdown of rushing, and Cameron Harris had like 9 carries for not that many yards. So, it would probably be more the same like last year, where I don't know how they'll start off because Cameron Harris started off hot, but now Jalen Knighton seems to be that go-to guy, and they also have what's his name?
My boy, Don Chaney Jr. He was out of the game. I was very disappointed with that.
We'll see how Miami, goes uses their run game this year, but I'm really excited about their pass game.
I'm very excited. Oh, sorry, I don't mean to step on your toes here. You got anything else?
No, that was it. I was waiting on you. I knew you had.
All right, cool. Yeah, I'm extremely excited about their passing game, but here's my problem. They got a lot of mouths to feed on this offense, believe it or not. We mentioned earlier, you got Charleston Rambo, who I do think actually is kind of becoming my guy for this offense, because this is not the only time he's had 7 receptions for a good amount of yards. Because in the scrimmage before the spring game, he reportedly had about 7 receptions for 109 yards and a touchdown. In this game, he had 7 receptions for 74 yards, no touchdowns, unfortunately. But even still, he's clearly that guy getting lots of receptions every single game. But on top of that, you got Mike Harley, who's kind of everybody's guy who they're drafted right now. But on top of that, you got Mark Pope. Keyshawn Smith and Xavier Restrepo are 2 more guys that have kind of popped up for this offense. To me, it's quickly becoming to where, again, there's a lot of mouths to feed on this offense. And so it could become a very frustrating situation if you own one of these guys where some weeks you could get more than 20 points, some weeks you're getting nothing because it seems like they're spreading the ball around a lot. The other thing we kind of touched on this earlier, I wish Don Chaney Jr. was in this game. I wanted to see what he was looking like because I think he's probably the most talented back they have on that team right now. So I'll go ahead and move on to my next game because our timer is up. And so goodbye Miami and hello the Bayou of LSU. I feel like Xavier wanted to touch on this one. So all right. I'll start with the wide receiver situation. That's Kayshon Boutte. And dude is electric. And to me, he's kind of solidified himself in that top tier wide receivers this year for CFF with David Bell. Some people call me crazy. I know Xavier calls me crazy, but I legitimately consider him in the exact same tier as as David Bell, if not a little bit higher, I'll be honest, because again, to me, this offense is probably going to score more points than Purdue's offense. But regardless of all that, the other story of all this, of course, is the quarterback battle between Max Johnson and Miles Brennan. And I saw some people putting out some weird stats and everything, so I went and I found the actual stats of this game. Max Johnson went 11 for 17 for 180 yards and 2 touchdowns, including long passes of 45 yards and 47 yards. Miles Brennan went 12 for 20, 116 yards, 1 touchdown, and a long of 39 yards. So watching the game, it felt like Miles Brennan, I'll be honest, was having the better day. But as soon as I went back and looked at the stat sheet and everything, I kind of realized that, yeah, technically, stat-wise, Max Johnson had the better day, which is, again, it just adds to this confusion of who's going to be the starter and everything. Xavier, I know you kind of planted your flag with Max Johnson. I've kind of planted my flag a little bit with Miles Brennan, but like the deeper and deeper we get into this and everything, the more just I'm not sure who's going to end up winning this battle and everything unless one of them transfers. And of course, like you have all the rumors about one or the other transferring out of this if they don't win the job. So I imagine Ogeron is going to push this battle as late as he can because he doesn't want one of these guys to transfer over the summer. So let's go to my thoughts there on the situation. Of course, you're seeing like I'm looking at ADP right now with Miles Brennan dropping, Max Johnson's rising up just a little bit, but even still, like it's getting to the point where both of them are just undraftable because you don't know who's going to win this job. And I honestly don't disagree with that. There was a breakout star, in my opinion, and that's Jontre Kirkland. Again, everybody was talking about Kayshon Boutte having 131 yards in the first half of that game, which, again, ridiculous, awesome. Dude's going to be a star. Everybody seems to miss the fact that Jontre Kirkland went 16 receptions, 209 yards, and 2 touchdowns in that game. Like, I think everybody kind of missed that. Like, LSU seems to kind of have their next guy up. And so he's kind of the breakout star there. If you're looking for like a late round guy, I would not be upset with you if you just took Jontre Kirkland as a late round guy for your team. And then rushing, Tyrion Davis-Price, who I think is going to be the number 1 back on this offense this upcoming year, played. He looked really good. But again, John Henry Jr.'s out, so I don't know what that carry load is going to look like split between the two of them. I want more information. Give me more information for my spring games, god damn it. Xavier, what are your thoughts here? I know you got thoughts on LSU.
Yeah. I'll just re-solidify my Max Johnson hype train at the end of the year where I was like, I don't think he's going to lose that job just willingly, and I don't think anybody expected him to. I was like, you beat Florida in a really close game, and you closed it out, even though it came down to a shoe, which is always still going to be funny. But, yeah, I like what I saw to Max Johnson. And with that receiving room, like you said, with Jenkins having 16 receptions for over 200 yards, I think it's still David Bell at that number 1 tier. It's like, who else is there at Purdue that's really going to challenge him like that? If you're telling me there's another guy that's able to get 200 yards at LSU.
I mean, Milton Wright's a name that comes to mind, but I don't know, you're not super high on him, but still.
Man, that's 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. It looks like it's taken away from my receiver. Now, Kayshon Boutte is not a transcendent. It seems like a transcendent wide receiver where
but even
really
still, 131 yards, or what do you actually have? No, 162 yards in this game and 1 touchdown. Yeah, another touchdown was another long touchdown that was taken away. To me, this offense is something that can produce 2 wide receivers. I'm not entirely sure about that with Purdue quite yet.
Oh, I mean, all I need is just 1. If I can just get David Bell to do what he does, then that's all I care about. And if
fair enough. So, we need to push that discussion for a whole episode in and of itself, I feel like.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll go ahead and move on from LSU here. Xavier, which team are you going with next?
We'll go with North Carolina.
All right. All yours.
Yeah. So we move up to North Carolina. Sam Howell, without all his weapons, all of them are gone, and there were
literally all of them
suspicion. Like you lost Daz Newsome, you lost De'Ami Brown, you lost Michael Carter, Javonte Williams. Like those are 4 guys that produced in your offense. I don't think there was only one other guy that probably scored points in your offense from last year that actually did something meaningful. And that was Josh Downs, who actually had a great game this game, which I was happy to see. And Sam Howell still looks comfortable, behind that O-line and with Josh Downs. And I know Jared mentioned this earlier. UNC is producing a nice little running back room.
Yeah, I mentioned that in the Campus to Canton
interesting.
podcast, which you should go listen to, by the way.
Yeah.
It was a fun episode.
UNC with Matt Brown and with his philosophy of how he wants to run the program with what he's doing, and Ty Chandler coming in, I think UNC is not going to drop off as much as people suspected after the end of the season. I think it will be a little growing pains and some process to get used to these new guys and getting that experience in actual game time situations. But I think Sam Howell is still one of the best quarterbacks in college football and still will be able to produce at that high level. Ty Chandler is an experienced upperclassman, so I think that'll be a nice little safety net for him. But I'm really excited to see what Josh Downs does, and I think he's going to be that wide receiver number 1 for North Carolina, and I can't wait to see some other guys pop up as well too. Jared, your thoughts?
Yeah, again, like you reiterated earlier, and I also mentioned this on our Campus Kenton podcast episode that we were on. This running back room is a lot deeper than I thought it was. You got plenty of names coming in. Like Ty Chandler is the name everybody's looking at this year, and rightfully so. Dude's extremely talented, and it looks like he got almost the bell cow role on that first team offense. But I think that's also because there's so many talented guys behind him, and Josh Henderson, Elijah Green, DJ Jones, Caleb Hood. So many of these guys back there, they're trying to figure out who's going to be the number 2 guy. And I think all of them can be, and all of them are talented enough to do it. Like, it's not like you're looking at the rest of your guys and you're like, oh, who do we have to put behind Tyler? It's like, no, who do we get to put behind Tyler Chandler? Like, there's so many good guys on this running back room, and they got a great O-line, or not, they got a great running backs coach after Alabama hired theirs away. Everybody thought like, oh no. But then they went and hired like a 2-time National Recruiter of the Year to be their running back coach. I'm like, that's incredible. Like you said, I'm happy to see Sam Howell just pick up where he left off. Trying to think anything else that I would want to mention for this game. Yeah. Last thing would probably be Drake May behind Sam Howell. Looks to be the next guy at North Carolina, and he's going to be probably just as incredible as Sam Howell. He looks awesome. So, any last thoughts, Xavier? Or you good?
I'm just ready to see who you got next. Hopefully, you don't take my team.
This is just like a draft. Like a draft. Well, I'm going to go down to the big old state of Texas.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to go to the Texas spring game here. Don't have a super ton of things to say about here. Again, the big story here was the quarterback battle between Hudson Card and Casey Thompson. And while both, I think, had their highlights of the day, I think both were giving it their all, and the problem really came from the receivers rather than the quarterback play itself. Like, obviously, like, again, both of them made their mistakes. Both of them had their ups and downs, but again, it was just so many drops coming from these wide receivers. And there's also just so many of them to where they're trying, again, it's kind of like the Miami situation for me. There's a lot of mouths to feed on this offense. Unfortunately, these mouths tend to be spitting the ball back out with their drops, but it's like, I don't know, there's like no clear number 1 guy. If I had to put a stake right now, I would go Jordan Whittington, mostly because of just the talk that Steve Sarkisian and just the entire Texas organization has been talking about this guy. And it sounds like he's developing good chemistry with both Card and Thompson. I'm trying to think of anything else I'd want to mention here. Bijan Robinson's going to be great. Like, dude was electric on the field. They didn't play him a super ton because why risk injuring him? Because he might, I'm not going to say he's going to carry this offense, but this offense will run through him come the fall, and he's going to be fantastic. He's going to be one of your top fantasy guys this upcoming year. And I don't tend to talk about kickers very often on this show, but I just want to say Cameron Dicker hit a 63-yarder in this game. So I'm just saying. All right. Any other thoughts for you, Xavier? I once again realized I did not set the timer.
No, you're fine. I think you hit everything. I was just waiting on the Bijan. I was like, look, that's my guy this year. I think I have him rated as the number 1 back for me personally. I know a lot of people are, still thinking Baris and Muhammad Ibrahim, but I like the upside of Bijan this upcoming season with Sarkisian.
Yeah, he's my running back 3 right now. You just mentioned I do have Brees Hall and Mo Ibrahim rated above him. Mostly because, again, the coaching change is kind of the big tiebreaker there for me. Not entirely sure how he'll be utilized. I imagine he'll be utilized better, but I need to see it to believe it.
Yeah.
So, all right. That does it for the Texas game. Xavier, where are you moving on to next?
Oh, man, we're going to go to their nice little Red River rivalry. We're going to go boomer, zoomer, horns down. Sorry to all our Texas fans out there. We're going to go with the OU and Lincoln Riley's team.
Real quick before you get into this, can I just point out it's amazing the fact that they incorporated the horns down into the OU logo? Can I just point that out? Like, I've been looking for a chance to talk about that on this podcast because that's amazing. That is pettiness at its best. I love it.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, you're good.
Timer reset.
Yeah. So what I got from this game is Spencer Rattler looks like he's ready to make that leap for next season. He's going to be one of those top quarterbacks taken either in the first or second round. I'm pretty sure he's not going to make it past the first, considering the weapons that he has and the talent that he has. The interesting story that I'm excited about is the running back room, and it's Eric Gray and Kennedy Brooks and a few other guys have been released from the team. So now it's really just going to be Eric Gray and Kennedy Brooks and maybe some other guys down the depth chart, but those are the two main guys. And Eric Gray, like I kind of suspected in the beginning when he made the transfer to Oklahoma, I thought it was a godsend for him. I thought that was the perfect situation for him to go to, considering what I saw at Tennessee. And not to say his talents were wasted, because he still showed up and sort of carried that Tennessee team, even though it wasn't to wins. They weren't getting blown. They were still getting blown out, but like they weren't losing in embarrassing fashion.
It wasn't Gray's fault. I was going to say, it wasn't Gray's fault that they were losing.
Yeah, it was not. It definitely, Gray did his job. And I understand why he wanted to leave and go to a better program, because he felt like his talents were just being, maybe not maximized to the greatest potential, and probably wasn't going to be looked as hard as some other players. So I think this is the perfect situation. He had a great day. Definitely looks like that number one back. Kennedy Brooks, 1 year removed from football. Looks like he's been removed 1 year from football. So we'll see as more time goes on, if he can return to form. But I think that it's going to be an interesting backfield. But I 100% am into Eric Gray. And I think everybody should, buy the stock in too, because he's going to be a monster in fantasy, I believe. I think he's going to be one of those top tier backs if things go the way I suspect him to with the Lincoln Riley system. Another good thing about OU is their wide receiver room. Like we mentioned earlier with the transfer, with now they have Mike Woods, they have Marvin Mims, and they have a 5-star freshman, which I'm excited about, Mario Williams, who showed up and acted like he's been there for 2-3 years now and ready to go into the draft. I'm like, man, this dude looks amazing. And a lot of people are speculating that he could be, a true freshman of the year type candidate or something like that of that nature. And I don't doubt them for what I've seen and for what I've heard. He's a 5-star wide receiver coming in. So if he lives up to the hype, then, man, Oklahoma's a dangerous team to look out for, especially on offense. So I think I left you 30 seconds, Jared. I know you probably want to say some more.
Yeah, it seems like my hopes and dreams of Kennedy Brooks making a comeback of the year performance have kind of gone down the drain for the most part. He barely got carries in this game, which could be due to injury, but also, again, it seems like Eric Gray is going to be that guy for Oklahoma. The other name I want to point out here is Caleb Williams, freshman, 5-star, number 1 overall recruit in the nation, and good God, he deserves it. We saw Bryce Young a little bit last year. We saw, to me, Caleb Williams might be the best freshman quarterback since Trevor Lawrence. Just the way he was running that Oklahoma offense. Now, granted, it was a simplified version of the offense and everything, but you could feel the confidence oozing out of him. You could feel this man was running that offense like you were talking about Mario Williams. Like he'd been there for 2 to 3 years already. He did not look like a freshman out there. He looked like a guy who was ready to take over that quarterback room that day. Even over Spencer Rattler, in my opinion. He looked that good, and I was very, very surprised by that, just how good he was. So, yeah, those are my kind of thoughts that you hadn't touched on quite yet. So, we'll go ahead and move on from Oklahoma, and let's go to the West Coast, and let's go to the University of Oregon. So, my thoughts here, let's make sure I set the timer this time. There we go. All right. Look at me improving, setting the timer for real this time. Alrighty. So, a couple of notes I wanted to make about the Oregon spring game. First things first, quarterbacks look a lot better than I thought they would. I'm not going to lie. They got themselves a pretty deep quarterback room there. Anthony Brown seems to be the guy that's going to be the starter, at least leaving spring camp. Again, there's plenty of opportunity still for that competition to kind of open back up a little bit, but he got a lot of the first team reps, and he's also like a 6-year guy. So I imagine that Mario Cristobal is going to value that experience that he brings to that locker room probably more than anything else at this point. And you got Ty Thompson and Butterfield kind of developing there behind him. So I think if you're going to draft a quarterback from Oregon this year, you need to go with Anthony Brown. Running back situation, CJ Verdell, once again, another running back that they just kind of kept out of the game. You got limited carries in this game, so I would have liked to have seen a bit better like what kind of carries he'll be getting. But again, that's not even the guy I want in the Oregon running back room. That's Travis Dye is who I want because he gets tons of receiving work as well. And he's almost too talented to keep off the field at this point. So I say draft Travis Dye over CJ Verdell. The real surprise story of the day for me was the wide receiver room they have at Oregon. Xavier, you mentioned Devin Williams as a sleeper a couple weeks ago on our Sleepers podcast, but they got a room there, man. Because again, you got some veterans like Devin Williams, like Johnny Johnson, the third, I believe, and you got guys coming in behind him like Troy Franklin, Dante Thornton, Micah Pittman. They got some serious depth going on there at Oregon. And if you're in a C2C league, definitely grab guys like Troy Franklin, Dante Thornton, maybe Michael Pittman as well. Like, I don't see Devin Williams or Johnny Johnson doing anything this year to where they're going to be a value in the future. And I don't see, this room's going to have a ton of mouths to feed. But as soon as I think guys like Devin Williams, like Johnny Johnson kind of get out of there, Troy Franklin and Dante Thornton are going to be some serious fantasy assets to be owning in the near future. Anything else I got? Yeah, basically what I was just already saying, where it's like, if any of these guys separate themselves from the pack in this wide receiver room, they're going to be a huge fantasy asset this upcoming season. You got 30 seconds, Xavier. Go ahead.
Yeah, not much to really say. I'm just, I'll speak on my hopes. I really hope that Ty Thompson wins the job. I love Anthony Brown Jr. I think he did well towards the end of the year, but I think Oregon is in desperate need of that next prolific quarterback like a Justin Herbert or Marcus Mariota. And I believe that Ty Thompson has the skill set to do it from what I've heard out of him coming out of high school. And, you know, didn't have a terrible spring game, but obviously he's still new to campus and doesn't know the playbook fully and still getting acclimated to college level competition. So, but if he does end up maybe one of these days, or maybe one game in the season where he ends up with that job, then I think Ty Thompson will be a great waiver wire pickup if they decide to go that route. Because I believe Oregon, and I think the Pac-12 championship is going to be between Oregon and Arizona State, or one of those two teams.
Okay, so you're like me, and you're kind of out on the whole USC hype a little bit.
A little bit, mainly because of their defense, but I believe in Keaton Slovis.
I don't. All right, regardless, we'll move on from Oregon here. Xavier, which team you pick it up next?
We'll go with Texas A&M.
All right.
We'll go back to the SEC and see what's up with Jimbo's team. Yeah, overall, it was a very, I would say, uneventful day, to where a lot of questions were still led to where who would be. I mean, Haynes King, can he be that guy to replace Kellen Mond? And he's not. He doesn't look like he's gonna reproduce or even get close to Kellen Mond's level. Now, I could be wrong. It was only spring, and he has an entire summer to work on his craft. And that's a ringing endorsement right there. Can't even get to where Kellen Mond was. Yeah,
I'm joking.
So, I mean, Kellen Mond came out of high school, 5-star, great guy. So it's definitely different. Kellen Mond, I will say, had a great season last year, and I think we should respect that. And he did end up getting drafted in the 3rd round. So obviously there are some believers out there, and Haynes King has a lot to live up to. So we'll see. But I think the big story is a lot of people were having maybe not sort of hesitations, but they kind of understood what Anais Smith was. But now I feel like Anais Smith is moving towards the majority of that receiving role. instead of just, being a dual threat of a receiver and a running back. Now, he did run the ball a few times, which, back to old ways, which is also great for any league because you're getting rushing and receiving attempts. But him as a receiver definitely puts him in that upper echelon of receivers you should get pretty early. I would say around that like 5th or 6th round, maybe even 4th, if you're in desperate need of one, because I think he's just that talented to where he can do so much in the field. Now, I will be excited to see and hear more out of camp or DeMoss that's coming back from suspension, former 5-star, to see how he works out with the team. The running back room is in great hands. We did not get to see A-Chain play, which I was a little bit disappointed to see, but Isaiah Spiller is going to be just fine. I know he had some nagging injuries late in the year, but he'll have the offseason to nurse those and get those back to health, but still looks like a prolific running back and one of the top guys in the running back room for this upcoming year. So I think that's so far mainly about the team. Jalen Wademeyer still a top tight end, to go after. He'll definitely get drafted probably next year. So I think he's that efficient at what he does to where he gets targets and touchdowns. So.
Yeah, I agree with most of all what you said. Again, the no A-Chain thing, again, I feel like I've done nothing but complain about the fact that running backs weren't playing in their spring games this podcast, because that was such a theme this year of just like, oh, well, this guy's not playing. I guess I don't get to see that.
Well, we did find out our collab with Campus to Canton with last time we were with them.
Yeah, A-Chain's a track star.
Yeah, so that we found out that A-Chain was at a track meet, so it's not like it was a question of health, but it's just the fact that
no. Yeah, I know.
He's a multi-sport athlete, and I like my running backs, running track, because if you're on the break in the open field and nobody can catch you because you're running, 100 meter in less than 10 seconds, I really want you on my team.
Yeah, this is fair. Again, once Isaiah Spiller goes off to the NFL next year, like A-Chain, like I'm usually a conservative guy in terms of like, oh, I need to see it to believe. I've seen enough with Devin A-Chain. He's going to be a monster. Yeah. Last thing with A&M, you mentioned Anaya Smith, and I liked what I saw. Specifically, what I really liked, he's getting deep targets. The last drive for the Maroon teams, he got 3 straight deep targets in the end zone. So that tells me they are fully committed to having him be a factor in the passing game, which I think is going to be huge for if you want to get value out of him as a wide receiver. So we'll go ahead and move on from A&M. And let's see, where could I go next? There's a lot of good teams still available, and we are running out of time relatively. Let's go to, I mentioned them earlier. We'll go to UNC or USC, the Trojans of USC. So, a couple of things I wanted to mention here. So, in terms of the quarterback situation, Keaton Slovis is still obviously the guy. And I think you're looking at Jackson Dart becoming that next guy up. You had Jackson Dart come in at the same time as Miller Moss, but Miller Moss is lost as far as I'm concerned. He definitely looked the worst out of this group. And to give you an idea of what his day was like, Xavier, if I ever told you a quarterback had 2.6 yards per passing attempt or 4.8 yards per passing completion, that tells me that this coaching staff does not trust him at all. And if you got Jackson Dart, a fellow freshman who is providing much better numbers than that, Miller Moss does not look like the guy who's going to be the next man up coming into the next couple of years. Again, I mentioned earlier, I'm not quite as sold on this USC offense as some people are. Now, Drake London, I do think is still going to be a fantastic fantasy asset, but I'm also not going after guys like Gary Bryant Jr. or Brew McCoy, or again, as much as I love him, Taj Washington, I'm not quite going after him yet because I don't see this offense as a team that'll be able to keep up with more than one wide receiver. And I think for right now, Drake London's that guy. I would have mentioned Stephen Carr, but he is transferring. So now all you have left is Keontae Ingram. But again, this is an air raid offense. You're not going to see them use Keontae Ingram in a rushing capacity too much. Now he can catch out of the backfield, and he did have a really nice catch for about 50-something yards, if I remember correctly, in the game. But also, again, I don't know. Maybe I'm just being maybe I'm just being negative here, but I'm just not sold on this USC offense. Xavier, what are your thoughts?
I think I'm sold on it. I'm not gonna, go based off of one spring game. I think Slovis showed, even though as I see now that JT Daniels was obviously the better quarterback out of that room before he transferred. I think Keaton Slovis is not, in no capacity, that much worse or just a severe drop off. I do view Keaton Slovis as one of those top quarterbacks in college football, and a lot of people have him, maybe going off to the draft next year and being a high pick. And I believe in his arm. I've seen it enough to where I'm like, look, I know what you can do, and your completion percentage is off the charts to where I believe he had 70% last year, but only playing maybe 6 games. So obviously that would go down more because of the COVID year and now already.
And also because almost all of them were for less than 10 yards. This is the Jake Fromm syndrome.
Yeah. So, I mean, I like my quarterbacks to where, they don't make too many mistakes. I know his first year was kind of rough, but now, as we see him now, he looks a lot more polished. And I think with the weapons that he has and what USC does usually with wide receivers, I think they have a good coach in that room to, maybe produce 1 or maybe 2 guys out there. Hopefully that would be like a Taj Washington. Drake London is fine. But I believe Michael Jackson, the third, I believe, or is just Michael Jackson?
I think it's just Michael Jackson Jr.
Michael Jackson Jr. Is going to be an up-and-coming receiver for that offense as well, too. So
you might say he's a thriller of a player.
Oh, my God. Puns. Yeah, we need to ban those immediately.
Ban those on the show. Alrighty, I'll write that.
I'll write that puns immediately.
I'll write that down for any guests in the future. No puns on the show. Xavier will hunt you down. Alrighty, so we'll go ahead and move on from USC here. Xavier, which team you going with next?
We'll go with. I'm surprised you didn't go with them before USC. I was gonna go. Well, I guess I'll take them from you. I'll go Ole Miss.
All right. Find their logo real quick. There they are.
Yeah, Ole Miss or Ole Piss, whatever you want to identify them as.
Oh my God! There's an expletive on this podcast. Go ahead. Sorry.
Matt Corral is, obviously going to be that starting quarterback. Luckily, this is fantasy and not like me actually evaluating a quarterback for their true draft position or capital, what they're worth. But Matt Corral throws the ball a lot in that Lane Kiffin offense, and he gets a lot of yards and a lot of touchdowns. Now, we'll not speak on his interceptions because some leagues don't have interceptions. Now, I am of the other opinion where I believe interceptions should obviously count, but that's neither here nor there. Matt Corral had a great day. He threw for 12 completions on 19 attempts for 208 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, the big story is with their receiving room. A lot of people don't know who their number 1 receiver would be after Elijah Moore would leave. And it looks to be that it's Braylon Sanders. He had 4 catches for 135 yards and a touchdown. That's probably more than their next 3 guys on the blue team combined. Actually, it definitely is. It's more than every other guy that played or got reps on the blue team and on the red team. So it's just insane. But we are still waiting. There is a caveat to that. Ja'Cour Pearson did not play, so a lot of people are still believing and hearing good things at the camp that he can become that Elijah Moore replacement because of his skill set. So that will be interesting to see. But it's not unheard of to have 2 wide receivers, have great years. Alabama's done it before. Ole Miss has also done it before as well with DK and AJ Brown, barring their injuries. So it's not out of the question. And I feel more confident with those 2 guys. At first I was like, maybe it'll be Braylon Sanders and Jonathan Mingo. Jonathan Mingo's still a reliable day. He didn't have the greatest of showings, but he showed me what I needed to see to where I was like, you know what, you could still have a similar year to last year. He had a touchdown. It was 2 catches for 15 yards. So, at the end of the day, he still, scored points and put points on the board. And I won't count him out, but I have to see some more out of the offense to see how Ja'Cour Pearson does. But I'll leave the rest to Jared to speak on this.
Y'all, stop trying to convince yourselves that the number 1 receiver on Ole Miss will be anybody but Braylon Sanders. We saw him take over last year after Elijah Moore opted out of the rest of the season. Matt Corral seamlessly transitioned to him as the number 1 wide receiver. And guess what happened again in the spring game? Braylon Sanders gets a touchdown, over 100 yards. This dude is going to be the fantasy relevant wide receiver on this team if you want somebody who is guaranteed. Now, Jonathan Mingo is a deep threat, but again, he is going to be a guy who's going to be seeing less targets. Now, he might get more yards per target, but even still, you have to go Braylon Sanders here. Ja'Cory Pearson's the only one where I'm like, okay, maybe. But again, I've just seen too much chemistry built between Matt Corral and Braylon Sanders to where I can't ignore it anymore. Braylon Sanders is my number one wide receiver on this offense, and I'm going to rank him accordingly in my rankings, which means he's probably going to be up there in my wide receiver 2, high wide receiver 3 range easily. So those are my last thoughts there. Xavier, any more thoughts before I move on?
Nah.
Alrighty, well, if you are going to take Ole Miss, I am then going to take, this actually is not related at all. I don't know why I'm trying to transition here. I'm going to go to Florida State. So Florida State had their game kind of earlier than almost everybody, in which there were a couple of things. It was one of the first ones. So again, I got to really kind of zero in on this game. And again, the big thing, once again, I was looking for is the quarterback competition that was going on with Florida State. Mackenzie Milton went 6 for 11 for 96 yards and a touchdown. Jordan Travis went 8 for 14 for 115 yards and 1 touchdown. Not a big difference between the two. That didn't really answer any questions there. Although to me, with Mackenzie Milton still being kind of hampered by the injury just a little bit, I still think he has a higher upside. And I've seen what he could do at an offense like UCF. And to me, I'm like, you have to go with Mackenzie. He's gone in a year. Jordan Travis will probably stick around for another year. At least go with the guy who provides you the higher upside and you don't have for very long. Regardless, that's just my opinion. I liked what I saw out of both of them. The big surprise for me out of this game was the 2 freshman receivers that kind of popped off in this game, Malik McClain and Joshua Burrell. There were a lot of hype coming in with these two coming into the program. They're these are guys Mike Norvell recruited. This is not somebody that he inherited. And it sounds like that they fit his system perfectly. And they are going to probably be big-time contributors very early on. The big name that wasn't already there because he hasn't been on campus yet was Andrew Parchment, the wide receiver coming in from Kansas, who is a very talented wide receiver and I think will be in the starting lineup this upcoming year. But these 2 freshman receivers, McClain and Burrell, I think are going to provide tons of value kind of going into later this season, like pick them up off the waiver wire, as well as for future seasons, whether you're in Campus Canton or Devi, or just a dynasty league in CFF. One last thing I wanted to mention here was the running back room. There wasn't much to gather on it. And again, I'm not drafting any of these guys. It seems very by committee kind of approach. The big surprise to me was the fact that DJ Williams, the former running back for Auburn, who transferred to Florida State, had a really bad day, like really, really bad. I think it was like 6 carries for 8 yards. Dude had a very, very rough day, and it's a shame for him. Hope he gets better. But yeah, that was kind of my big surprise. Xavier, you have any thoughts on this game?
Not too much. I didn't get to explore this game extensively. I just remember seeing some highlights and looking at Mackenzie Milton and Jordan Travis, to where I feel like they'll start off the season with Jordan Travis because it feels like they're still kind of nursing that Mackenzie Milton injury, where even though and usually in spring games you're not allowed to test the quarterback, like he wasn't allowed to have any sort of pressure at all. So
fair enough. All right, so we'll move on from Florida State here. Finish that one just a little bit early, but that's okay. Xavier, which team are you going with next?
I'll go with Auburn.
Auburn, all right. Go ahead.
Yeah, to start off with Auburn, I know a lot of people, were kind of worried about Texas Bigsby and his end of the year. He had some lingering injuries, but the spring game he looked good. So that's one great thing to look forward to, where he's a top back in this upcoming year for in the entire country. And I'm excited to see what he does with more production, and especially in a new offense. Now on to Bo Nix and the wide receiver room. I don't know. It's confusing because you're losing Seth Williams and Anthony Schwartz, 2 great receivers, and you're kind of leaving me with, a lot of question marks about, all right, I know Bo Nix isn't the greatest quarterback. I would never draft Bo Nix. I would never pick up Bo Nix on a fantasy waiver wire, no matter how many yards he rushes for or how many Houdini tricks he escapes out the pocket. I just won't do it because I know what Bo Nix is and I'm sticking to it. But there seems to be, this growing interest into him and Elijah Canyon, his receiver for next year. That Elijah Canyon seems to be the standout receiver that, will most likely be getting a lot of the targets. And it has piqued my interest a little bit, but I will hold off for now. I will say for people maybe in a campus that can or a dynasty, whoever ends up taking over Bo Nix's job in the future, and Elijah Canyon maybe can produce with overthrown balls and can catch up to Bo Nix passes or can get used to things like that, then oh my God, Elijah Canyon is going to be amazing and is probably going to be the second part of that offense behind Tank Bigsby. So it's not much to say, but it does pique the interest, and I'll keep a close watch on it and hear some more things. But for most part, it just sounds like Bo Nix is still what a lot of Auburn fans know him to be, and I guess they're okay with that. To where he's dual threat, he can do a lot more than his legs than he can with his arm, but also he has a very good arm, just not very accurate. So yeah, that's all I have to say. Jared, do you have anything more to comment on?
Yeah, no, I didn't have a ton of notes for this one. This is kind of one that I was hoping that you would take, and you did. Basically, Tank Bigsby is still good. What else do you want me to say? Dude's going to be electric this year, and then Elijah Canyon is going to be that best bet at wide receiver. If you want to draft an Auburn wide receiver this upcoming year, again, if you're me, I'm not going to Auburn wide receiver room right now. But if you do and you really want to, Elijah Canyon, probably the best bet there. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next team. And I'm going to go Boston College. This is a game that I actually had a ton of interest in because there are two names on this team that if you don't know them by now for CFF, you really need to learn them very quickly. And that's Phil Jurkovec and Zay Flowers. I do believe that Phil Jurkovec is one of the best values you can get in fantasy this upcoming year. I do believe this offense, and I can't believe I'm saying this because last year I picked Boston College to finish last in the ACC. I thought I thought it was going to be rough. It looked like they were having a real hard time, and then Phil Jurkovec came on. Turns out he's one of the best quarterbacks maybe in the ACC, and then Zay Flowers blew up as well. In this game, Phil Jurkovec went 14 for 20 for 196 yards and 2 touchdowns. Those 2 touchdowns were hooked up between him and Zay Flowers within the last maybe 3 to 4 minutes of the first half. You know that meme where you have the guy kind of playing video games, he's leaned back and everything, and then it shows him leaning forward just a little bit. That's exactly how it felt at the end of the second half with Phil Jurkovec and Zay Flowers. They kind of leaned forward a little bit, and once they did that, they can hook up on these touchdowns so quickly. And I love that connection between him. If I can get that stack, Zay Flowers and Phil Jurkovec, because they're far apart enough in fantasy for you to grab both of these guys. So to me, if you can grab Zay Flowers and Phil Jurkovec, it's an incredible stack to have for this upcoming year. I love what I saw out of them. The other name I'm going to put on here that I think is just one to watch, maybe not for this season, but for upcoming seasons, Taji Johnson, not Taj Washington. Taji Johnson. He recorded 7 catches, most of any receiver in this game, for 63 yards. So he didn't get not many deep shots or anything, but he absolutely is somebody I think we should be watching for the future. So Xavier, do you have any thoughts on this game or anything like that?
No, I knew early on that who Zay Flowers was, and I thought, maybe with a better quarterback, he would be, fantasy relevant and elite. But Phil Jurkovec surprised me last season. He did a lot of people where Jared had him, Boston College coming in last, and I may have not had them coming in last. It felt like there was probably some worse ACC teams, but I'm glad Boston College is being recognized for what they have, and Phil Jurkovec taking it to that next level, and being an actually decent quarterback that a lot of people are putting on notice to. So I'm excited for their future. Zay Flowers can move into. I know he's moved a lot up in a lot of the ADPs, and he's probably being looked at in that wide receiver 2 range, maybe even wide receiver 3.
In ADP, he is currently being taken as a wide receiver 2. He is the 17th wide receiver off the board usually. So
I'd say believe in the hype if you haven't watched Boston College in the past. So
Yeah, I personally think Zay Flowers could be a first-round receiver next year in terms of the NFL draft. So I think he's that talented. All right, Xavier, move on to your next pick. This will be your second to last team to talk about.
Okay, we'll go with Arkansas State.
All righty.
Yeah, we'll go a little bit out of the way. Is that the right logo?
That is Arkansas State. That is Arkansas
Really?
State.
Wow. Okay, very creative.
I couldn't find a PNG for their wolf logo.
Yeah. With Arkansas State, it's a little bit interesting because Jonathan Adams Jr. is no longer there. So you're just left wondering who will be that number one receiver. A lot of people believe it's Corey Record because he had that amazing game towards the end of the season. And he showed that in the spring game. And I'm really happy for him. And I don't blame people for wanting to buy into his stock. But I think a lot of people are forgetting, like a lot of people forgot. I'll relate this to Minnesota's wide receiver room, to where a lot of people were just so infatuated with Rashad Bateman that they kind of forgot about Bell and at times. And I feel like it was the same way with the Arkansas State, where Jonathan Adams Jr. was obviously clear-cut, amazing, could do no wrong, fantasy relevant, did everything for you. But Jeff Foreman did not lag behind that much. And a lot of people are forgetting about him. And I think he deserves a lot more credit as well, to where I think it's a legit discussion of who will be that better receiver. Now, I think Corey Rucker has the better talent and is probably, riding the high of last season and can continue the upward trend. So I think Corey Rucker has a higher ceiling, but in terms of consistency, I like Jeff Foreman. I know it's Corey Rucker's freshman year last year, but besides that game, he really wasn't much like there. Jeff Foreman, I had about 4 or 5 100-yard games. So I like to see that. I like that trend of what I saw.
All right, I'll talk about Corey Rucker and everything because he is kind of the big guy on this team. I know some people want to draft Lane Hatcher. I'm not sold on Lane Hatcher as a QB there, so I'm not quite going there yet. I'm gonna look up Corey Rucker's stats real quick because I think you're a little bit wrong on that. No, you're not entirely wrong. It's only his last game where he went 300 yards and everything. So yeah, never mind. I thought I could prove you wrong there, but regardless, I do think that Corey Rucker will be the most fantasy relevant guy this upcoming year because in this spring game he was the leading receiver again. He went for over 100 yards and a touchdown, I believe. Can't remember the stat off the top of my head, but again, to me, it just showed that he will be the number one guy this upcoming year, regardless of how good the QB play is. He's going to get targets. He's going to get value. So I think he's absolutely worth being drafted. I wouldn't draft him as high as he's being taken right now because I think right now he's being drafted. Let's see, Corey Rucker. Yeah, he's the 20th wide receiver off the board, and he's usually drafted before the end of the 5th round, which to me that's a little too high for him right now. But I do think he is going to be a fantasy asset this upcoming year. And I wouldn't be surprised if you were also right about Jeff Foreman. I do like Jeff Foreman. All right. So we'll go ahead and move on from Arkansas State for my last spring game that I want to talk about here. And I'm going to go off the beaten path a little bit here. There's a lot of good teams left and everything. But this is a game that kind of stuck out to me for a team that also kind of stuck out to me. And that's the Illinois Fighting Illini. Yeah, Xavier's eyes went about as big as dinner plates right there. I think that was about the last team on earth he expected me to name right there. But I do want to talk about this game as soon as I can find my notes for it. I just had it. Where'd it go? So it's right here. So the big thing is here, this was starters versus backups. So the starting offense went against the backup defense, and the backup offense went against the starting defense. So the scores are a little lopsided. The final score of this game was like 65-15. Like, it wasn't close. But there are a lot of names here that I did want to talk about. Chase Brown, running back there. He was starting running back last year. He's going to be starting running back again. He went 80 yards for 2 touchdowns. I think he's going to absolutely be that number one guy who they're going to be going to for this offense, especially in a Brett Bielema offense, who always wants to run the ball first. But also you got two other running backs behind him, Reggie Love III and Chase Hayden, who I believe in the future are going to be great running backs for this program. There are 2 more names I wanted to talk about here. One was a receiver first of all, this is a great name, Donnie Navarro III. He went about 131 yards and 131 yards in this game. No touchdowns, unfortunately, but he did clearly was the number one guy that was being targeted as much as he could have. And the other one, and Xavier, this is a Ghost of Christmas Past for you right here, Luke Ford, the tight end for the Fighting Illini. He had 5 receptions for 88 yards and 1 touchdown in this game. And they were talking about on the broadcast that he absolutely deserves more targets. He absolutely deserves to be used more in this offense. And I would not be surprised in a Brett Bielema offense who likes to keep things on the ground with short passes and everything if Luke Ford does get more targets as the season kind of goes on. So I'm putting Luke Ford out there as a tight end that is worth drafting, especially if you have like a solid tight end for your first guy. Luke Ford to me is absolutely worth that backup or the second tight end worth being taken for your team. So Xavier, you have any thoughts there on this game? I imagine you may not have watched this game.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't not have this game on my radar, but I'm glad that you've taken the time to look at this to where Illinois might have something besides I believe it's Chase Brown, right? Is their running back?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Besides Chase Brown, I thought there was nobody else or nothing more to look into. So definitely great insight for that.
Alrighty. So again, those are my thoughts on Illinois. I kind of want to go off the beaten path there a little bit because that was just a game that I didn't expect to stick out to me, but it did. When I watched it, I was like, wow, there's a lot of good stuff to kind of be taken from here. And if they can actually run the offense like they want to this year and not fall behind in games and have to pass, I think this could be a very fruitful fantasy team, possibly, especially on the ground game. So, Xavier, you got the last spring game here. Make it a good one.
We'll go with Cincinnati.
Cincinnati, all right. All right, what you got to say here then?
Yeah, Desmond Ridder still looks great. Definitely one of the top quarterbacks to take. I suspect. I remember last season going in when I heard Cincinnati might be a top 4 team in the nation, or Cincinnati could possibly do some things. I was like, "There's no way you're telling me an AAC team." Like, no, you're crazy. But Cincinnati, kept on winning their games. They basically went undefeated in their conference until their bowl game, and they met Georgia, which they had a great game where they pushed Georgia to the wire, which I did not expect to happen. Desmond Ridder looked amazing. The defense was great. But in the spring game, Desmond Ridder just picked up where he left off to where he still looks like he's going to be, that guy using his legs and his arm, where another big question last year was, can he be accurate and use his arm, which he proved. And now for this season, I think he's just going to expound on that and just try to get himself drafted to where, he could have gone out this year and still would have probably been, drafted a lot higher than a lot of people would have suspected maybe a year ago.
He probably would be the starting quarterback on the Texans right now, to be honest.
Oh, yeah. But, they have, Jerome Ford is going to be a great back for them because they're losing Dokes, or is it the other way around? I believe
losing Dokes, Jerome Ford is saying.
Jerome Ford will be a very good back for them. They have another receiver, senior receiver, that is going to be a reliable. I just lost my notes. I believe his name is Michael Young Jr.
Yes.
It's going to be a great receiver for them this year. Him and Desmond Ridder already have that chemistry, and him being a senior and having that priority. But they have a few freshmen coming in there, turning heads as well. So Luke Fickell has a lot to work with this offseason, and definitely I know they're expecting to have similar or even better results than they did last year, where, I didn't even think it was possible for a group of 5 team to have playoff aspirations or just any type of, outside of group of 5 success. So I think Cincinnati, for what the conference that they're in and the style of where they're moving and with their program, there's a lot of talented players on that team, from the running back room, the wide receivers. You could probably find like 1 or 2 this upcoming season. And obviously, Desmond Ridder is going to be fine. So,
Yeah, I'll name one more name here, and that's Josh Wiley, their tight end. Dude is absolutely worth getting drafted onto your team. Desmond Ridder does like his short passes to the tight end, and I think he will absolutely be a red zone target for them. And then you kind of briefly touched on the fact that you didn't know if it was possible for a group of 5 team to have playoff aspirations. This team absolutely does and should They look good. They look like a team that's ready to take the college football world by storm, and they have the schedule this year to do it, in my opinion. If they go undefeated this year, I will switch sides on the whole playoff thing, because I'm one of those guys that defends the playoff. I'm like, no, the group of 5 teams have not had a good enough schedule to where they shouldn't be even considered. If Cincinnati goes undefeated this year, beating Notre Dame and Indiana, 2 very good teams, they absolutely should be considered for the playoff. And if they aren't, I will rage against the playoff system just like everybody else. They absolutely deserve it.
Yeah,
so
I'll start pushing for expansion at that point. I'm not there just yet, but
yeah. So yeah, God, I don't even know how many spring games we went through, but there's even more that we wanted to cover that we just couldn't really have time for today. Otherwise, this would be a forever and a half show. So, I mean, some of the games here that we missed that we would want to talk about, like, I wanted to talk about Arizona. I did like that game. Arkansas is a big one. Georgia Tech was another pretty big one. I feel like we could have touched on Louisiana Lafayette. What was that, Xavier?
Utah and Nebraska.
I would say Utah, Nebraska, Tennessee, South Carolina. You said Nebraska already. Washington and Washington State. Vanderbilt has some good information in it. But if you guys want to know our takes on some of those games and everything, please feel free to DM us or just add us on Twitter. Like, we'll be more than happy to give you all our takes. It's just, unfortunately, we're already at 1 hour and 25 minutes, and we don't want to keep you guys here all day long. So, yeah, spring games are in the books. We got lot of good information out of them for this upcoming season, and now we're really moving in towards draft season and just setting up your leagues and everything. Fantrax just announced recently in this past week that college football leagues are open again. You can renew your leagues and everything. So I've been busy kind of setting that up, asking my league mates like what they want to do, what they want to change and everything. So I imagine that's something we're going to be touching on here real soon. And yeah, just another year of spring games in the book. A lot of good information. Xavier, got any more thoughts?
No, agree with everything you said. A lot of good spring games. We'll definitely talk some more about draft since it's draft season. I know we haven't. Know it's probably about that time to where we haven't touched much on defenses just yet. So we'll probably get into that next episode. But yeah, it's been a blast having this show with you today. I feel like we touched and got around to a lot of good players and a lot of good teams. So.
Yeah, and one thing I definitely want to touch on is I've been compiling an ADP sheet, and I'm fixing to start setting up an ECR ranking sheet, which, if you don't know what that means, ECR is Expert Consensus Rankings. And so I'm fixing to start setting those up, and I want to start seeing where, like, the differences between average draft position and Expert Consensus Rankings. And then I maybe want to get an expert or two on here, and let's discuss our rankings versus their rankings. Start figuring out all these differences of opinions, start hashing it out so we can be more and more prepared for the season. So yeah, we got a lot of good stuff this upcoming year. Xavier and I got a little bit more time on our hands now that the semester's over, so we're excited to bring all this exciting content for you guys. So, is there any more things, or are we good here?
Nope. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow us on all podcasts, Spotify, Apple Music. I know I'm probably forget YouTube as well. We really appreciate it. Don't forget to leave a 5-star review and tell us, how we're doing. If we want us to touch on certain subjects, don't forget to DM us or just leave in the review and give us 5 stars if you enjoyed the podcast. But we really appreciate all the support that y'all have given us so far.
There's a sneaky little rumor out there that if you leave a question in your 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, that question and answer will come at the forum on the beginning of one of our episodes. So, but that's just a rumor. So, alrighty, Xavier, I appreciate you having you on again today, man. And yeah, let's go enjoy the summer, and we'll see you all next time.